Hi. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and thank you also to Richard Attias and his colleagues for putting together such a fantastic program. We're here, as you heard, to talk to you a little bit about what it means to own art, new trends emerging in ways to own art. Owning art is a very big deal these days. There's a $700 billion annualized art market out there, and all kinds of people want in on it. But it's a very intimidating thing to contemplate for most people, both from an economic standpoint and from a logistics standpoint. If you own a really valuable piece of art, you effectively own something that the rest of the world, in some ineffable way, also regards as belonging to them, because it's part of what we call world cultural heritage. And unsurprisingly, the trends that we have seen that have made publicly traded equities accessible to vast audiences, that have made real estate purchasing accessible to much larger audiences through things like real estate investment trusts, those have now come to the world of art. And you have the emergence of things like ArtX Stock Exchange or Masterworks that allow for people to effectively own shares in individual artworks. In some instances, those trades are registered with the SEC, and the person who's purchasing the art doesn't have to deal with how to store the art, what temperature to keep it at, what level of humidification it should have, how to insure it, how to move it around, how to hang it up in their house, et cetera, et cetera. But all of these sort of changes and developments have also had a fundamental impact on the way in which we think about art. Historically, we didn't really think about art as a tradable commodity. We didn't even really care necessarily if it was, quote, authentic, or if we knew who had created it. We just cared what it looked like, if it was beautiful, if it moved us. And arguably, some of those things are fading into the background as increasingly art and the technologies surrounding the trading of art are turning it into much more of a commodity and arguably less of a purely aesthetic asset. I'm here with a very good friend of mine who knows more perhaps than anybody else in the world about art as an aesthetic asset. Tom is the world's largest private owner of Rembrandts. And to hear him talk about his collection is to hear someone having virtually a religious experience. I'd be really interested, Tom, to hear you talk a little bit about how these new models for art ownership are something you can relate to, and how maybe there's something that you find problematic.
To my mind, the most important trend in the development of the art market as a cultural phenomenon is the ability to harness great art so that it can be preserved in the memory and transferred through future generations. The possibility that one would be able to own a piece of a Rembrandt, for example, I find thrilling. And I don't believe that it in any way debases the art itself to be treated not so much as a commodity, but as a currency, in the same way as I would say gold is a currency. It's not really a commodity, to my mind. And when you look at art through that lens, when you look at it as an evangelical exercise, as Saatchi put it, it's not about the collector, it's about the artist. And when we would have exhibitions in different parts of the world of the collection and bring together a dozen or 15 Rembrandts, Vermeer, et cetera, and people would say, you must be so proud. And I would say, but pride has nothing to do with it. It doesn't take a genius to buy Rembrandt, it takes a genius to be Rembrandt. It takes a genius to be able to be a master that engages in the genetic transmission of his brushwork, of his being able to capture a moment in time, an interior life that influenced other great people who influence everyone to the contemporary world, whether it's Picasso, Van Gogh, Lucian Freud, Francis Bacon, all the way through to Zhang Fanji in China or Jenny Saville. There is this genetic transmission that I do believe the collector can have a role in doing. And ironically, the future should not be people like me. The future should be people who are committed to sharing the art. Now, in our case, we adopted that from the very beginning, from the first loan that we made to the Getty Museum.
Thank you so much.
And I saw the interaction between a young girl and a painting of a boy by one of Rembrandt's studio mates. And I realized, we're not going to live with these paintings. My wife and I were as one, so we acquired a couple of hundred old masters. We've never lived with one of them. We've been a lending library for most of the time, anonymously, and then we started to come out with exhibitions around the world. I hope that that's a model followed by other people, but I don't judge what people do with their art. It's their money, it's their taste, they want to live with it, great. But what I do believe is that the more broadly defined the participants can be in the art market, whether it's people buying a fractional share of Vermeer, for example, or Rembrandt, or whether it is indeed art investment trusts, which would be buying this art and then doing, as we've done, lend it all to public museums so that they're shared. This, to me, would be very positive. Now, interestingly, it would also lead, I think, to greater transparency and price discovery in the art market. Because when you have the opportunity to deal with a brand like Rembrandt, which is known all over the world, if you get people in China, Russia, South America, in Western Europe, etc., who are taking an interest in it, number one, you contribute to the mission of showing the enduring relevance of the artist, and number two, the price will go up because there are only 40 of them in private hands, and every once in a while a museum like the Getty will buy one, take it off the market, and add to the value of the others. This, to me, creates an opportunity. The democratization of the art market could have a huge impact on being able to focus people on the enduring value, not just financially, but culturally, of our inheritance.
So I want to pick up on one thing you said, connected to what happens when a museum buys a work of art, because from my perspective as CEO of the Getty, effectively when we buy a work of art, we go out, say, spend 50 million, 100 million on a work of art. For us, the moment we've purchased it, it has no monetary value, because we're not in the trading business. We're not going to deaccession it. We're not going to sell it in the future. We're in the very fortunate position of having good, sound financial footing as an organization. So when we buy art, we're never thinking about selling it in the future. So weirdly for us, the moment we've purchased something, the value that it has is the value, the intangible value that it can provide to people who are coming to see it. But you're suggesting that when we do that, it nevertheless has an impact on the art market at large.
Of course it does. If you're dealing with an artist where there is scarcity, and certainly in masterpieces of most art, there is a scarcity value for sure, it will have an impact. But you're doing yourself a disservice, because I know very well that you and the Getty are doing your utmost to be able to buy paintings in concert with other museums. So rather than being strictly territorial, that you're holding hands with other institutions so that there can be a rotation of this art to the widest possible audience. That, to me, is another trend that I would like to see happen, which also will have an impact on the art market, because as the value of art rises, the ability of museums to be able to buy them becomes harder. So in the case of the Getty, you have this incredible endowment, but most recently, as in a beautiful example with the Joshua Reynolds that you bought with the British, with the National Portrait Gallery, that was a beautiful example of where this painting will be shared. The pair of Rembrandts that was purchased by the Louvre and the Rijksmuseum. the greater the dissemination of the art, the more that audiences are able to participate in that. This is a good thing. And it is a virtuous circle because you can't stop the price of masterpieces going up, but you can make it much more affordable for, ironically, a much wider audience by doing it in partnership.
Absolutely, and if you're a museum, chances are you're not going to have something on the wall all the time anyway. What Tom is referring to is a recent joint acquisition that we did with the National Portrait Gallery in London that could not have happened for a variety of reasons I won't go into. The British couldn't have done it on their own, and we in California couldn't have done it on our own. And we wound up doing it together, and this is a work of art that is now going to have an infinitely greater audience. It's going to travel back and forth across the ocean every 5 years. And it's a very innovative, surprising to think that this is an innovative thing in 2023, but it is, and I think it also is reflective, just to go back to where we started, of broader trends in the direction of having the opportunity for works of art to be co-owned, to be shared. They reach greater audiences this way, and for the most part, it reduces the hassle, although in the case of the arrangement that we've made with the National Portrait Gallery, you can imagine that there is a very, very, very long document attached to the purchase saying who has to treat it how. It's sort of like having joint custody of a child. But in any event, I do think that this is the future. I know it's what you're doing with your collection. Tom and his family are tremendously generous with a world-class collection, making it available pretty much to any museum who comes asking to be able to share part of it. So those are, the direction of travel is one of sharing, shared ownership, and philanthropic sharing on the part of some private art owners. And it's one that everybody now can participate in. So thank you very much.